This is Talk for Food. Your portal into quantum possibility. I'm Adam Abraham. Each week I'll be your guide on this expedition where we'll explore the near and far reaches of this thing called life on Earth and beyond. Talk for Food is brought to you by
Philos Books, publishers of I Am My Body Not, A Freed Man, an Emancipation Proclamation, and producers of Understanding MMS, Conversations with Jim Humble, the only feature-length documentary on the subject of the Miracle Mineral Supplement on Earth.
Yes, there are many things we can do to control a tornado. If you want to divert it from hitting buildings and all, if you can just get ahead of it, then you turn on a specific frequency and it will pull that tornado any direction you want until it dissipates. So
wow.
We could control them.
Well, if we're talking about controlling tornadoes and stopping them, you know this isn't idle talk, so it must be Talk for Food. Hello again, everyone. Thank you for joining us again, for tuning in to Talk for Food on web at talkradio.net with Adam Abraham. And yeah, you're listening to, I started you off with a little teaser, something more of our conversation with Paul Pantone, the developer of GEAT technology, global environmental energy technology. And this is part of our conversation that we had, which in fact is going to be part of a DVD called Indelible Promise. Now, you are hearing portions of that right here, right now, as a listener and viewer of Talk for Food, but this is going to be part of a DVD. Paul Pantone has been for 20 some odd years developing what he called GEAT. Methods that are based on natural phenomenon, natural laws of nature, oneness with respect of nature. That's what GEAT is what it does. And it affects many, many elements of life. And so you're hearing some of this, seeing some of this as it is being recorded as a function and part of our radio show, our video show. But this is information that is not widely available. When you start thinking, in 2011, a tornado basically leveled Joplin, Missouri, causing about $3 billion in damage and 117 lives. Also in 2011, 178 tornadoes basically went through the state of Alabama, and that one affected, wow, sheesh, it cost 482 lives. I'm reading from CNN Money, and $5 billion in damage. Now, if there was and is a way, real, honest to God, genuine way to not only control the movement of tornadoes, but basically to nullify them, to stop them in their tracks, do you think, let me put it this way, do you think it's better for us to run around and chase the storms and look at them and record them and, get back and forth and play cat and mouse with them, even while lives are at stake? Or would it be better to take some knowledge, take some action based on some understanding and stop it? Would it be better to have $3 billion actually from these two events, from Joplin, Missouri and the Alabama tornadoes alone in 2011, $8 billion and almost 600 lives, not to mention the thousands, the tens of thousands of lives that were affected? Or would it be better to have taken active, conscious, knowledgeable methods to stop those? I have to ask you, because Paul Pantone has been presenting this information for some time and tornado abatement is just one. We're thinking of tornadoes right now, general public, is that this is something that is, we don't have any answers for. Yes, we do. Now, are you willing to talk to and respect and listen to people who have studied it and come up with the answers? Or do they have to come through some particular channel, some particular university, some particular process and authority to say, oh, well, maybe this is, I'm not sure. Let's get a peer review and see what they say. You know, the saying and the seeing is in the actual doing and the abating. And that's something we've been more inclined to put the actual results aside to come up with a committee to see what they have to say about it. Well, at any rate, our conversation today is going to be a continuation. Our show today is going to be a continuation of our conversation with Paul Pantone. We're going to take a break now. We're going to get into it. And there's more, but I want you to understand and appreciate there is something to be known, to be understood, and I'm sharing it with you, even though there is a product that you can share this with other people as well, called Indelible Promise. You need to hear this, and we're making it available to you. Let's take a break. We'll be back with Paul Pantone, and we'll talk about to become a tornado cowboy when Talk for Food returns on webtalkradio.net.
American adventurer Jim Humble discovered how a simple chemical compound and powerful oxidizer, chlorine dioxide, could be effectively used to reduce toxicity within the human body. The buzz on Jim's discovery, MMS, Miracle Mineral Supplement, is spreading, but not the understanding. Until now. Understanding MMS, Conversations with Jim Humble is a new DVD available only at understanding-mms.com. The Understanding MMS DVD will show how you can be part of your own solution to toxicity. Here's the documentary producer.
This is Adam Abraham, inviting you to get informed and help others to be informed of this amazing way to reduce the body's load of toxins, harmful microorganisms, and pathogens from the waters inside our body.
Get your understanding today for only $29.95 at understanding-mms.com. That's understanding-mms.com. Use passcode RBN to receive 10% off.
Our health really depends on it.
All right, this segment of Talk for Food gets started on webtalkradio.net, also on iTunes with Adam Abraham. And as you may know, this conversation with Paul Pantone began at the Extraordinary Technology Conference in 2011 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It spilled over into an invitation to visit him at his home in Oklahoma, in the heart of Oklahoma, which I really enjoyed, and it led to what we are now will become Indelible Promise, and you can find that on indeliblepromise.com. But you don't have to do that. You can listen to this now. Indelible Promise will be available December 1 and on from there. So depending on what time you are listening to or hearing or viewing this program. But the conversation, the subject matter is diverse. We give you a teaser to talk about getting hold of, studying, creating, and studying tornadoes. But it's about understanding how to create them, and not just how to create them. It's really about the dynamics of energy, but more so how to work with them to understand their energies, understand the dynamics that cause them to come into being, also how to stop them. But there may be even other understandings that we can gain when we come at it from a standpoint of understanding and mastery, as opposed to simply about avoiding some damage. There may be ways that we can use the energies that are on display, the tremendous amount of energies that are on display in a tornado, in ways that serve humanity instead of ways that, not say destroy, but certainly disrupt. So here it goes. Paul Pantone. So the fuel processor is just one of the GEAT technologies that can really be you talk about a paradigm shifter. It can have just an amazing change.
Well, when I got into GEAT, I couldn't explain how it worked. People would ask how it worked. I'd point to it and say, fuel goes in here, clean exhaust comes out there. What more do you need to know?
Yes.
Well, they needed to know why it worked. Well, since there was no book in the world on it, I had to start coming up with all the different discoveries, and one at a time documenting each and every one of the discoveries so that later we could put together the book. And this is the first draft of the book, which is only 181 discoveries so far that we've made, and the list will go on and on and on from here. But things that scientists said could only happen out in space, we can recreate right here on the table. A good example of that was, we had a gentleman here from Europe. He had just built his first engine. He wanted to test it, and we have a policy. The first time you run any engine or furnace, you have to do it outside to see how good it runs, make sure there's no gas leaks. Well, he had started his up outside, but he had set it down in a puddle. So a little bit of water was running over the top of the board that he had the engine mounted to. About 10 minutes later, there's a knock at my door in the office, and they said, you got to come out right now. We've got tornadoes at the back door. Well, they were going towards the back door. I was running to the front door. And they're going, no, it's out here. And I said, yeah, and I'm going out here.
That's right. Going the other direction.
I don't need to see a tornado personal and up close. And he convinced me, no, they're little tiny ones. They're being produced by the GEAT. That stopped me in my tracks, and I turned around and I said, what did you just say? He said, no, around the bottom of GEAT, they're forming tornadoes. With that, I went to the back to see what was going on. My secretaries and my wife, everybody's packed around this engine. And they're all out in the rain. I'm saying, what the heck is going on? So I walk up real close, and lo and behold, there's some little 14, 16-inch tornadoes. Where the water was running across the board very thin, you could see a ridge forming. A nice round circle, and it would start coming up in the air and doing a wiggle, and all of a sudden the funnel cloud would form, and it would come right up to the edge, but it wouldn't touch the reactor. And one after another, as one would start to weaken a little bit and start moving further away, the next one would start getting bigger and bigger, and it'd move in and push him out of the way until it just disappeared. Bang, it's gone. Well, I saw this and I was going, wait a minute, there's lightning bolts inside those tornadoes.
Tornado and lightning.
Lightning inside the tornado. So I ran back to the dressing room and I grabbed a coat hanger that had a shirt on it, threw the shirt on the floor, ran out there. I'm all excited, and I take the coat hanger and I stick it against the pipe and down to the tornado. And lo and behold, I get blown back about 25 feet. I'm sitting on my butt with my hair kind of out wild, my fingers smoking. I went, holy Toledo. Those little tiny tornadoes have a wallop. Get my camera. Hurry up, we got to do this again. Well, my employees started grabbing me going, no, boss. You're not going to do that. No, give me a rubber mat to stand on and a wooden plank. Let's insulate ourselves and get me some rubber gloves, and then we'll do it. And I grabbed the welder's helmet so that the flash wouldn't hurt my eyes. Well, I kept getting over there, and I'd lower the helmet right in place, and I'd touch that little tornado right to the tip, and bam! I killed about 43 tornadoes in about 30 minutes.
So you learn how to create them and how
to destroy them.
All right.
Now, knowing this, and then years later I see on television, it was on Discovery or one of the programs where they were saying, to study tornadoes, we have to send these trucks worth $500,000 each out, and all these people and endanger their lives to study them out in the field. Then we have to chase them, and we have to find out where they're going, and we get very little knowledge from them. I said, good Lord, we can build one right now. It doesn't have to be more than 40 pounds. It's about this big by 10 inches wide, about 2 feet tall. And even girls can pick them up and carry them. They're not that heavy. So we could sit there and build one for every university in the world that wants to study tornadoes. But do you see any universities pounding on my door? No.
Well, it seems like they're running in the other direction too, it seems.
Well, no, you got it. They're running towards money, though.
Right.
They get government grants to buy the trucks and pay the kids to go out and chase them. And why not do it right in the classroom where we can do it up close and personal and control that tornado? Now, if I can ground a tornado out, that gave me an immediate idea on how to save a lot of tornado damage and lives.
You're listening to Talk for Food on web at talkradio.net with Adam Abraham, and you may also be viewing this on YouTube or wherever else we may have this video presentation. And we're talking with Paul Pantone.
Is have an over-the-shoulder launcher that has a 25-foot tail that drops out of copper, nice flat wide copper strip that just drops out. The minute the missile gets into a vacuum to the center of the tornado, it would immediately do a nosedive into the ground to ground it.
The implosive forces would draw it down, correct?
Correct. So at that point, you could have tornado stoppers instead of watchers.
Wow. Different TV show now. Storm chasers, okay?
Storm killers, yeah.
Storm stoppers, yeah, exactly right. But look at the change that can occur. We are so accustomed to watching disaster, waiting for disaster, expecting it to hit, all of that, but with no clue as to what to do about it.
Yeah. So making these discoveries is great, but you need to compile the knowledge, which is why now I'm at 181 pictures and drawings of all the different discoveries, but we now need to bring in the experts from each field to help me validate each and every one of them as much as we can of what is going on and why. Since we're not going to find science books out there that have it. So we may end up with a large series of books. TV has programmed us into believing things, like in Star Trek, the first episodes, when you see the Enterprise taking off and you hear the sound. Well, folks, there's no sound in a vacuum. There's no sound out in space. You wouldn't hear it take off, but wouldn't be entertainment without the sound.
Right, absolutely. Wow. You mentioned vacuum technology and the education material in that subject just kind of went black somewhere in the 50s, about 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah, if you go back to the 1950s, which I've gone to many old bookstores, antique stores, and I bought the old encyclopedias, and they couldn't figure out why somebody would want an old encyclopedia set from 1955. I mean, it isn't worth anything. Oh, they're ornaments in my home. Oh, okay, they help me load them. For $5, you buy a whole set. But when you open it up to Tesla, there was about 50 pages. When you open it up to vacuum technology, there was about 150 pages. The American Vacuum Society had all kinds of information in there. But 1958, nothing. Gee, it all got erased. Tesla, 2 paragraphs. Why? It's technology that would open people's minds up to realizing that what we have today is garbage. Tesla knew how to make a telephone call so he could call anywhere in the world using the Earth as a transmitter, and it was a local call, crystal clear. A lot better than my cell phone. Yet today, we still don't get calls as clear as what he had. That was in the 1890s. He built his radio-controlled, remote-controlled boat that he used to take out there in Michigan or New York. The man was many years ahead of his time. So when Dr. Sue and many of the other scientists I met with, including Dr. Andreas Richter, they all said, Paul, you're 50 to 100 years ahead of mankind. We don't even have a clue of why it works. So unless somebody can teach us how and why it works, all we have is the notes in our books that say you're wrong, but here I am looking at it working.
So what did you or have you learned from observing the tornadoes? That well, certainly you learned how to stop them.
They are very controllable. You can pretty much program where they're going to go. If you have one coming and you'd like to divert it a specific direction, all you have to do is create a heat pattern to pull it off to the direction you want to go. So yes, there are many things we can do to control a tornado. If you want to divert it from hitting buildings and all, if you can just get ahead of it, then you turn on a specific frequency and it will pull that tornado any direction you want until it dissipates. So
wow.
We could control them.
I'm picturing a new form of emergency response team, for example, and it doesn't mean that it has to be different people. It could be the same people just learning something new.
People. It could be highway patrol on the road that are out there to save lives every day already. If they had the equipment where they could just get out, set it up on a tripod, aim it, look through the scope, hit a button, and fire that missile, shoot it into the center of that tornado. If it hits the center and goes down, it's going to blanket right there on the spot. You're going to have a hole in the ground where the lightning hit. But it's done.
And when you start thinking about the forces that are in that tornado, they are so strong. The centrifugal forces are so strong, they can take and take a house who knows where. Well, then the implosion, the centripetal forces are strong enough to exactly just what you said.
Yep.
They will take it down. It won't go any further than that.
Nope, it'll stop it right there.
It just takes a willingness to just be open.
Listen.
Wow, that is amazing.
So if we could take 1,000 engineers and work on that one project and scientists, that's great. But how about the x-rays? I mean, we found that when we hold a piece of x-ray film up next to the reactor rod like this while it's running, the film is completely exposed. It goes through lead, it'll go through your fingers and everything else. But in one of the x-rays where the man was holding it up, the technician, with a lead glove on, these 4 fingers showed on the film as soft tissue, like an MRI. But when you looked at the film in a bright light, you could see the bones of the thumb on the other side. But you could not see the lead glove at all. It went through the lead.
It saw life. It
Yes.
recognized life and let life show, but it did not see the other.
Now, we've hit that phenomenon with Brown's gas.
Brown's gas,
If you're running along cutting steel and aluminum and bricks and everything else, you run across your hand, it doesn't cut your hand. Gee, okay, it senses life. Well, when we take that same technology like Sonny Ward has, where you have 2 electrodes coming together to create a plasma ball, you can take steel, anything you want, and drop it in there. Coins, they drop into the ball of white light, they don't come out. They're vaporized. But drop a banana in there and it comes out a banana.
Probably a little bit more energized too.
Probably. So why is it that plasma recognizes life and will not hurt life?
Because it is life.
It's intelligent energy.
Yes,
So we are making these discoveries. We're documenting everything we can. So we have a lot to learn. This is only the beginning.
So the idea of an intelligent energy that recognizes life, another word for that would be plasma.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay.
Plasma is recognized as the 4th state of matter. It was about 1983, I believe June of 1983 in Moscow. Scientists from all over the world all gathered to discuss whether or not they would accept plasma as that 4th state of matter. Mm-hmm. Because there were some that still were holding off, saying they didn't believe it was a state of matter. Well, after many weeks of arguing, they all concluded that plasma is in fact the 4th state of matter and should be recognized for that. They had then another week of lectures on plasma that went on, and the book of Al Bateman and super high frequency plasma generators was created there. One of the scientists that got up drew a picture. If you looked at that book, I think it's on about page 26, there's a picture of what he said was what the other scientists were saying was a plasma generator. And what they were saying was that as the plasma or fuel vapor is fed up into the tube, it has to be sealed off here and then put under a high amount of pressure and then bombarded with electrons so that when it was released at the other end, the new plasma fuel would come out and burn very efficiently. Well, one of the 600 scientists at that conference said, I believe you're all wrong. I believe if you use a vacuum to pull it into the chamber, that it would generate its own plasma field. He was laughed off the stage and asked to leave the conference. It was so preposterous. But the same week that that was happening in Moscow, I built the first blue engine, which is up against the wall over here, and it did run with a vacuum, and it was self-generated. I just didn't know it was called a plasma generator.
Wow.
For 10 years.
This is one of the active agents and elements, and it has many, many applications, not just fuel, essentially.
The number of applications for using plasma energy is unlimited. It could replace our need for fuel in every piece of equipment we now have on the planet. It could take products that we now consider waste, vaporize it, to then use that as a new fuel. How much energy is there in a can? Well, most people would look at an empty can. We don't want to promote a name brand here, but they'd look at this can and say, well, empty, that's only worth 2 cents or 5 cents for recycling value, well, that represents, using a gate reactor and understanding the process, the equivalent of 3.5 gallons of gasoline. So what is that can worth to me? A lot more than it is to you.
Absolutely. Wow. And then you start getting an appreciation for the value we're actually getting, or should I say the value we're wasting, using the methods that we're using right now with this throwaway type of disposal mentality.
Well, if you were to take all your plastic and your styrofoam and your plastic bags and you shove it into a heat exchanger and you extract the heat you need to turn it back into gas, diesel, and kerosene, well, you could either separate it into the 3 fuels or just use all the vapor in a gate and you have no pollution. So it depends on what kind of fuel do you need. Here in this country, we have been a throwaway society. We waste and waste, and we never stop wasting. People really don't look at all the waste product we have, but refrigerators are so idiotic. Heat rises, so where do you put the compressor? Underneath it.
Right.
I'm sorry. Look at some of the better grade commercial units where they're on top, because the heat's rising. You don't want to sit there and heat the box you're trying to cool off. Unless, of course, you're a refrigerator company or a power company, then you like these. And look at the amount of insulation. You're trying to keep, on an average day, you're trying to keep the temperature in the fridge at 38 degrees, or freezing in the fridge, yet you're trying to heat the house up to 70. There's a lot of temperature differential there. And what do you have for insulation? Oh, about 1 inch, ½ inch. Well, why isn't that solid insulation? Why isn't it more like a thermos bottle so you can keep that cold in and the heat out? Because they want you to waste electricity. They don't want it to last that long. So why make it so it will?
And then, of course, we're still believing we've got the latest and the greatest. I mean, it's always the latest and the greatest until their next latest and greatest shows up.
Well, yes, but I have to look back at history. I mean, we're coming up now to a point where between the solar flares and a planet coming by our area of the galaxy here, where a planet 5 times our gravitational field coming by us is going to alter our fields, and I believe we're going to have earthquakes, volcanoes, and other horrible disasters. We're not going to have power. If the projections I've seen are even close to accurate, we could be anywhere from 2 to 10 years without power. Well, if you can generate your own power on demand, then you're going to have what you need. But don't count on the government, don't count on a utility company, they're not going to be there. So how do you keep your food? I mean, people say, oh, well, after 4 or 5 days, the meat's no good. Well, wait a minute. Our grandparents and our great-great-great-grandparents didn't have fridges. They learned how to use clove, cinnamon. They used all kinds of organic things to treat the meat. How many people do you know have served you a piece of ham at holiday time that have cloves in it?
Yes, I
Have you had
remember
it?
that. Yes.
Almost everybody has. Do you know why they were in there?
That I did not know.
It's a preservative. Now, what do they tell you about pork? Oh, you don't want to leave it out too long, it'll go bad. Well, that's funny. In my house, we put all these cloves in the ham, and on Thanksgiving, it was served all day long, sitting on the table. And when we were done, there wasn't room in the fridge, so we just put a cloth over it that was damp and come back for days. It'd be sitting on the table. It didn't go bad. Because the clove oil, which is later used in our society to make Novocaine, kills all the germs and bacteria. The meat sits there staying good. 5, 6 days later, your meat's still good. So by putting cloves in the meat, it will help preserve it. Putting salt on it will help preserve it. So you put cheesecloth with a salt pack on it, and your meat's going to be good for 4 to 5, 6 months. You didn't need a refrigerator.
Not long after this conversation, I was talking to my mom. I asked her, if you didn't have any electricity, what would you do to preserve the food? And, you know, she wasn't really sure. And it really shows how we have come to forget. We have not been passing on. It shows up what we are passing on from generation to generation, or perhaps what we are not passing on from generation to generation. It's not that we don't know or not that we haven't known, but what are we actively using? What information or knowledge are we actively using now, and how could it help us? This information is so vital, so valuable that, well, it's not forgotten. Point is, can we spread it? Right now, we're taking a break. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation with Paul Pantone, where he will share more nuggets of knowledge when Talk for Food returns with Adam Abraham on webtalkradio.net. Jim Harshman is made to change from water treatment to water transformation technology, having installed a unit from Photonic Water Systems for almost 2 years now. He tells you in his own words what has changed.
Well, here's the problem we had when we built this house in 2005 or 2006. We got it done and found out the water was extremely hard. There was a lot of calcium buildup on the outside of the pool and also into the misters inside the courtyard. And so we know we had an issue with the water right off the bat. So in trying to solve that, this is where we started to play around with the different options that were in the market. Kind of explored what was on the home shows at the different green shows and also home shows that the Phoenix area was having. And it was just a major problem, so we had to get it solved. And we ran into the product, and I guess we can't say enough about it. I mean, it took an intolerable scum problem, a white hard water problem, and just neutralize it to where we don't have the buildup anymore. We don't have the buildup on the pool, the courtyard fountain, or into the various systems that we have, such as your misters and your shower heads. So it's 100% work. Now, how it works, I have no idea, but it's not how it works that I'm worried about.
Available at photonicwater.com.
We come in all shapes and sizes, but for all our apparent differences, we share an important oneness.
I am my body, not.
Now your child can discover the oneness behind human diversity with I Am My Body, Not, from Philos Books. This progressive book, written by Adam Abraham, helps parents and teachers introduce some of the most basic human concepts and questions. Celebrate the body and the spirit with I Am My Body, Not. Order now, just $19.95 plus shipping and handling.
I Am My Body, Not is available at philos.com. That's PHAELOS.com. Order yours today.
Hi, this is Mary Meadows, and you're listening to Talk for Food on webtalkradio.net.
The second half of Talk for Food starts right here and now on webtalkradio.net with Adam Abraham. And without any further ado, you know who we're talking to. You know what we're talking about. We're talking about GEET, Global Environmental Energy Technology, with Paul Pantone, its developer, its soul and heart. Anyway, let's continue.
During tests, when I was much younger, we took a refrigerator that the compressor was shot on, and we pulled a little pump piece on, or a piece of the tube, the filler used in an inner tube for a car. The stem.
Oh.
We put one of those in the side of it, and we pulled a vacuum on the refrigerator. It wasn't much of a vacuum, but we had put a dozen oranges in there and a couple trays of strawberries. About a month later, opened the door up. We had to break the vacuum first, let the air out, open the door, and there's no mold, there's no fungus, everything's fresh. Took a strawberry, tasted fresh, grabbed an orange, closed the door, pulled the vacuum on it again. Came back a month later. A year later, the orange that was still left was still good and fresh. It took 6 months before the first sign of any mold on the strawberries.
6 months, wow, yeah. Okay. This is just by pulling the air out.
Pulling the excess air out of the chamber that doesn't need, so bacteria can't grow.
No oxygen, no breathing, okay.
You got it. So by building boxes that are airtight and then pulling a vacuum on them, you can have your food in there for 6 months to a year. You don't have to worry about going out and getting a lot of food. But if you don't have power, you better understand vacuum technology a little bit. You better understand herbs and how they work. I mean, it wasn't that important to us because we have refrigerators and power and all these things. But back when Christopher Columbus was sent over here, it was for a trade route. because they needed all of those herbs to keep the meats and things fresh. And salt was the main method of doing it back then, unless they could get their hands on cloves. Well, coming up with a shortcut to bring the cloves in would help. But now we can go down to the health food store and buy bottles of clove extract, 100% pure clove. Doesn't take more than a few drops of that. Rub your meat down with it, and it's going to stay good.
Wow, that is amazing. I was thinking when I said no oxygen, no breathing, but actually it's no oxygen, no oxidation. Will probably be the K here.
Yep.
Yes.
We also did cut apples in half, and we put them in the refrigerator to see how long they'd stay good. And when we pulled the vacuum on them immediately and opened the door up 30 days later, there was no browning to the apples. So even though it was air temperature, not refrigeration temperature, in a vacuum, they didn't oxidize.
Wow. That is, these are the things. We're talking with Paul Pantone, developer of GEET, which is Global Environmental Energy Technology, and natural-based, life-affirming-based, nature-respecting, and working with, in harmony with nature, but to do some things that our society thinks is in general not possible.
Many of the things that we have been able to accomplish, according to science, was not possible. But once you start bringing the scientists in and showing them, that's when they back up and go, okay, our books are wrong. But continue. What's next? Come on, teach us. That's what I'm all about. I love teaching.
Now, you were talking about giving us some introduction to plasma, too. Let's talk a little bit about some of the elements of plasma, because I think there's something really special
years ago,
here.
A professor had told me that it would be unusual, but if I ever got to a point of getting the proper scientific equipment where we could film plasmoids, I should call him. And I said, what is a plasmoid? And he said, it is a radical particle that is created around plasma that is the most erratic behavior you've ever seen. Even though it's electrical in nature, electricity normally spirals in a straight line, these little things move in such erratic behavior, it looks like they're trying to tie themselves up into knots or something. Here's a picture of their type movements. I don't know if you can zoom in on that at all. But he had told me that these little things are the hot particles created from plasma field. They're very bright, and normally around the outside edges of plasma. So I told him if I ever saw anything like that with the equipment, once I could afford it, I would call him. Accidentally, one of my employees had put together a unit wrong, and we had 2 or 3 people using power equipment that day out in our shop, and when the third piece of equipment turned on, it blew the breaker for the garage. Well, I heard the breaker trip, so I went running down my house, down to the breaker box to turn it back on, and just as I turned it on, I could hear the guys out in the shop saying, "Turn it off!" Wait a minute. Okay, I'll turn it back off. So I ran back down to the garage, I opened the door up, I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Step in, get your eyes adjusted, you aren't going to believe what you're going to look at." Well, I hear one of the engines running right below the step. After maybe 3 or 4 minutes, my eyes had got accustomed to everything. I said, "What am I looking for?" He said, "Look down around the exhaust pipe." Well, all the way around the exhaust pipe, I could see these little red squiggly things just shooting. But it was exactly like that professor said. They were erratic in behavior, moving in all directions. Well, I reached down, I put my finger down there, and one of them touched my finger. And it felt worse than any bee sting I've ever had. Burn, pain, it was a jolt. And I pulled back on, "Woo, don't do that one again." Well, I looked beside me and I could see the edge of a piece of glass from a window, so I grabbed it, and right below that was a piece of aluminum, so I held the glass down next to it, and I moved it back and forth a little bit, watching the reflection on the glass. It was neat. So then I took the aluminum and held it down there, and I could see the reflection off the aluminum, but every now and then I could see a piece going through the aluminum. And they only worked for maybe a half a second to a second, then the ends burst into a red dot. They're gone. The energy is dissipated. Another one is recreated, though, immediately. Well, I told him, I said, "Do me a favor. I'm going to turn the lights back on. I want you to put a rope around this engine. Don't let anybody touch it until I get a hold of this professor."
Was this like a chain reaction, you might say?
it was some type of reaction that I couldn't identify.
A cascade.
Yes, a cascade effect, one after another after another. But they were all so erratic that I couldn't explain it. So I wouldn't let my employees near it anymore that day. I got inside, called the professor up. He came up from UCLA, set his cameras up, everything he could right next to it. Well, don't put a digital camera close to it. You'll erase it, and it destroys your memory card. Don't put a credit card near it. Credit card's not usable anymore. Well, he had his cameras and computers all set up around it, and he filmed it. And after he filmed it, he had everything put away again for his trip home. And he came in, I was sitting at my dining room table, and he was like a kid in a candy store. Oh man, I got it, man. I can't wait to get that on the computer and see what it looks like. And we're going to enhance it. We're going to do this and this and slow it down. When I got high-speed film, it's good. And he's, what are you doing? I said, well, I big magnifying glass. I said, look at these tunnels. He said, what? I said, through an 1/8-inch piece of glass, those little radical devils went in and tunneled all the way through it and then came back out. I mean, 90-degree, 160-degree bends. But if you look at it, you can see a perfect tunnel made, thinner than a human hair. Well, he grabs the magnifying glass and he's looking at it. Well, I've never seen anything like it. Well, every now and then you see one where it just went through the glass completely at a different angle. If you turn it just right, you could see right through the glass. But it was a beautifully polished tunnel. He said, can I have the glass? I said, sure you can. He said, how about that piece of aluminum? I said, sure. So he took it. There must have been hundreds of little holes in there. If you held it up to the light, you couldn't see. Couldn't see any of the holes. But if you held it up with a magnifying glass big enough, you could see the little holes. He said, I've got to get this back. We got to study this. Well, when he got home and found out nothing worked on his computer or cameras, it was all wiped out, he was bummed out.
I would guess.
But he did have the glass and the aluminum to prove they were there, and he said, I really saw them with my own eyes. And all of his buddies are going, sure you did. Plasmoids are not visible to the human eye. But then again, some of the other phenomenon that we've created is not visible by the human eye. So once we build the unit out of all glass, so you can see what's going on inside, and you see lightning bolts shooting down the length of that rod, back and forth. And at the very end of the rod, where the cupped end is, the north end, you'll always see a ball of pure white light. When you're getting a perfect reaction, you have a ball of white light. It creates an energy field, pulling energy from as far as 60 to 100 feet away.
Wow, wow. Did you ever do that again? Did you ever repeat the...
Plasmoids?
Yeah.
No, the reason we did that and left it for him to see it was just so he could see it. That generator had to be shipped out to a customer. So once he left, we went ahead and corrected what the problem was. One of our employees had used Teflon tape to seal everything. And he thought to make the screws stick better in the block of the engine, he'd even wrap the screws with a coating of Teflon tape. So nothing could ground back to the engine, and here this entire electrical field is trying to ground to something and he couldn't. So it was just dissipating out into space around itself. There was another time where we were running it and we ended up watching the aurora lights coming out the end of the, right through all the metal. We were getting the aurora lights on a dark evening.
So you were doing aurora borealis too?
Yeah. But to be able to replicate everything about planet Earth has led us to a whole new map of what planet Earth is and how planet Earth works. Up till now, up till 15 years ago, I thought the planet had a single axis that went from the North Pole to the South Pole as one piece. What I've determined is the North Pole has a north and a south area to it, and the South Pole has a north and south to it, about the thickness of the crust. So when the North Pole is turning to the right, the South Pole is coming towards it, equal distance. So to flip the poles would be quite easy. If it was one large pole, it would be very difficult to flip the poles.
I see.
And during the tests we've done that we validated in Sydney, Australia, and in North Hemisphere, we found that there are some opposing things there that can prove our theories, which means that it wouldn't take that much energy as we go through the galactic belts to switch the north and south poles. And we would feel as if the whole pole shifted, but it didn't. It's just small fields of energy.
You're listening to Talk for Food on webtalkradio.net with Adam Abraham, and we're talking with Paul Pantone, the developer of GEET, Global Environmental Energy Technology. And this is also part of a video record. I don't want to call it a documentary, but to be called Indelible Promise, to be available on 4 DVDs at indeliblepromise.com. Let's continue to the conclusion of this show. Have you determined yet or seen a way that this method and way of thinking could be applied towards some of the other events that we are anticipating, like
Yes.
fields from large bodies, so to speak, coming through space?
Yes. When I first invented the gate and built the first one, I started in 1979. By 1983, I'd got the first model running, but I still wanted to make it better, which I told you, inventor syndrome. You can never make it good enough.
Right.
When I went down and I saw getting 21% oxygen out the tailpipe, 0 carbon monoxide, 0 carbon dioxide, 0 hydrocarbon. If I can do this good, I can do better. I can get more oxygen. Well, there is no satisfying an inventor. He always wants to do one better. So even perfect isn't good enough. You want to go better. So I started calling around trying to get information. I called the president and CEO of Texaco, Chevron, Exxon, everybody I could back then, trying to get help. They turned me on to their head scientists. They'd worked with me a little bit. They sent me crude oil. They really were cooperative back in 1983. And they stayed that way until about 1993. And then all of a sudden, they kind of cut me off when they saw the videotape showing 0 emissions running on crude oil, and they heard that you could run a car 90 times better mileage than you could on gas if you're using crude oil.
If it's not evident to you already, the point of the change, the point that Paul is making, and the point that may have caused the oil company executives no longer to be that interested in helping develop this technology, might be the fact that the whole refinery process, I mean, of whatever they do between the time the oil comes out the ground and the time it gets into your tank, I mean, outside of delivery itself, would be unnecessary. I mean, not only is it the cost of getting out, but all of the quote-unquote refining that's being done right now simply adds to the perceived cost of the oil. And the GEAT process basically circumvents all of that, renders it unnecessary. So seeing that, it just may be that they thought, well, maybe we shouldn't go any further with that. And I saw one of your old videos, and
That's an old video.
And oxygen was coming out the tailpipe.
But when they realized how good it was running, I got cut off. No more crude oil for me. I couldn't get it from anybody. So I started getting into different people. I called Smokey Unick and other people. I said, hey, Smokey, what secrets can you tell me about fuel that you found aren't in science books? And he said, well, I did get kicked off a racetrack for putting mothballs in the tank, because it gives you about a 30-40% increase in horsepower. I said, plain old everyday mothballs? He said, yeah. Okay, so I dropped a mothball in my tank. I took off, heading to my dad's on Beverly Hills in a car, my old Toyota, 320,000 miles on it, top speed going downhill 60 miles an hour, uphill 50 if you were lucky. Well, I got as far as Sacramento, and all of a sudden I realized I'm doing 120. And I look behind me, nobody's pushing me, so it had to do something with what's in the fuel tank. So I got off onto Interstate 5 and I started heading south, and I'm past the end of the speedometer. And I realized I got full power again. Well, when I filled up again, I put another mothball in. I took off out of the gas station, and as I was pulling out, my rear end tried to pass me. I go, whoa, hey.
You had some power on the road there.
Yeah, we didn't know that car had anything left in it, but it had plenty of power in it. It was the fastest trip I ever made to L.A. Got down there, did my business, and on the way home, I ran out of mothballs, only brought a couple with me, so now I'm putting regular gas in it, and it's getting back to 75 and 80, didn't want to go faster. And I realized just how much power is in naphthalene. Well, I mentioned that on a radio show. A few weeks later, I go down to the store to buy more mothballs, And they said, I'm sorry, but we don't carry them anymore. They've been pulled off all the shelves. Now, if you look at a box of mothballs, right on the bottom it says, not to be sold in California. And on the side of the box it says, may not be used under federal law for anything other than killing moths. Oops. So I guess they don't want you to get that better mileage and clean the valves out, but it sure cleans the engine up and gives you power. Well, I called Smokey back and thanked him, and I said, is there anything else you can tell me? And he said, well, yeah. He said, I got kicked off another track for using a piece of screen. I said, a screen? He said, yeah, just put the screen under the carburetor. It'll give you about a 30% improvement in mileage. Well, I took a piece of screen, and I looked it up. Anything I could find on it, it was good to screen rocks out of your water line up under a faucet. And this is what this is, 40 mesh. It'll clean out debris coming in through your faucet. Now they're all made out of plastic. But in '83, you can still find this in a few stores. But fire won't go through a screen. So it's a method of stopping flame, which I thought that was interesting. Then I heard that in 1962, Ford Motor Company also found out and patented putting a screen under their carburetors so the mechanics wouldn't die or get burned when backfires occurred. And I was not aware of it at the time, but some mechanics working in shops, when it would occur, they would be inhaling as they pulled away, and the flames would go right down into the lungs and burn them. And they'd suffer for 2 or 3 days before they finally died. A very painful death. Well, Ford Motor Company found a way of stopping it. Simply put a piece of screen underneath the carburetor. Well, the problem was...
They cared about the...
Oh, they
mechanics.
really cared. They did. They wanted to protect...
They took an initiative that the other
companies
did not do. Okay.
Yeah, well, they put it under the carburetors and started sending out their little Ford Galaxies in the middle of the year with the screens under it. Until the customers started calling up saying, hey, how come the car I got in January only gets this many miles a gallon? The new one I just got is getting 30, 40, 50% better. Well, they pulled up everything they could on those two cars and said the only thing different was a piece, oh God, that screen. Pull them out. So they recalled every one of their cars that year for safety inspections, pulled the screens out without telling the customers, sent the cars back out saying it passes safety, and everybody got crappy mileage again. Well, after I heard about this from Smokey, I put it on my dad's Mustang. He had just purchased from Ford, and he was getting about a 40% increase in mileage. He took it in for its quarterly checkup or regular checkup that they called him and said, you need to bring your car in. And he brought it in for an inspection. They took the screen out. I went back to the car dealer when I found out his mileage had gone back down. I said, why'd you pull the screen out? They said, we're not allowed to have that in there because it's not authorized by the factory. And if you put it back in there, we're going to void your dad's warranty. I said, but it improves the mileage and reduces pollution. We don't care. Our orders come from Detroit, and our orders are no screens under carburetors. So my dad told me to put it back on, and before he'd take it back to service again, he would make sure it got pulled out. But he wanted the better mileage.
Anyone given the choice, gosh, and looking at what gas cost in those days compared to today, it was still a no-brainer. You still wanted the better mileage.
Yeah. Well, from 1983 to about 1987, I must have installed about 300 to 400 of these in California and Nevada. And everybody I put them on their car got the minimum 15%, most of them in 30, 40% range. 2 of the vehicles came back at 70% improvement in mileage. They were big commercial buses with old carburetors.
Now, would this work only with a carburetor?
This would only, well, we'll go into...
Okay. Let's check.
That's a bad question. Well, what happens with it is the screen blocks the flow. If it's straight through like this, it doesn't interfere with the flow. If you held a can of WD-40 up, it goes straight through. If you hold it at a 45-degree angle and hit it with WD-40, it comes out as a mist, like a smoke from a cigarette. That is what burns in the engine, not the liquid. So this just helped to break it down so it would burn. You have less pollution. And injectors are supposed to spray a real fine mist. Well, they don't. If you hook this up to an electrical system and you watch how this pulses, it sprays out a wide mist, which is mostly liquid. It is not the way the car companies have indicated it's a vapor. No, it's a liquid. sprayed out. And the sad part was when we tested these injector against injector from the same package, some of them would put out 50% more than the next one would out of the same package. We got a hold of the place we bought them at the car dealership or the parts store and said, how come there's such a wide spread? And they said, there's no quality control. We don't have to. You're buying 8 injectors, that's what you get. There's no way to calibrate them or adjust them. There's only one spray. Well, because of that, you're wasting 50% of the fuel on some of the cylinders to get the car up to full speed.
Right, right.
So these are no longer what the manufacturers were saying, efficient. Bull. Carburetors more efficient. These were a way of conning people to get out of carburetors because this is new and improved when it really isn't improved. It's just new. And I'll bet you if you follow the money, you'll find some politician's name hooked to the patent or controlling the marketing rights to this, and that's why they're being used today. Now, to me, the carburetor was the wheel, and if it's properly done, it rolled smooth. Now we're using an 8-sided wheel, and some of the spokes aren't all there. But it conned the public into believing injectors were the way to go. If people today had to drive a 1940s or 50s car without their GPS and without their fancy stereos and without all the fancy stuff, they would hate it. But we could get those up to over 100, 150 miles a gallon easy. Why can't we do that with the modern stuff with computers? It's because of the garbage that's being controlled by people that hold the patents, mostly politicians.
Well, if it was up to me, I'd keep the conversation going, because even as I review this conversation with Paul Pantone, I personally am entertained and informed and impressed by nature, by the man, in terms of what he is sharing. I keep discovering that we have a lot of tools available to us that are, well, the key word is available. It's not so much beyond our ability to comprehend. We have tools that are available that can help us change our world in some phenomenal ways. Just in the last 2 shows that we've done, we've talked about some specific things that could have impact that totals billions of dollars every year in expenditures as well as in lives. Countless billions, and these are billions that we know of. We are concerned about nuclear fallout from Fukushima, from the Japan earthquake and the nuclear reactor that blew up there. We have problems closer to home. We have, I don't know how many, countless of tons of spent nuclear material that we have just been storing and storing and storing. It's sometimes at a cost of billions of dollars. But the more important thing is the fact that that nuclear waste does not stop being nuclear. We need to do something naturally to abate it, to nullify it, to neutralize it. And they are being stored because we're operating under the belief that we can't. Well, what if we can? What if there is a way? The reason why we're doing all of this, or at least the reason why I'm doing this, is because I believe that there is reason to believe that there is a way to do it, and it's easy to check. Now the question is, do we really want to make nuclear radiation and spent nuclear material, do we want to make it safe again? If you have any questions or comments or suggestions to me, you can reach me at email me at adam@talkforfood.com. And if you want to find or reach Paul Pantone, go to geetinternational.com. There are ways to reach him there. I thank you, Paul. I thank you for being a part of this adventure into quantum possibility. Let's do it again next week when Talk for Food returns on web@talkradio.net. Be well. Thank you for watching and listening. We'll see you next week.
Talk for Food is a Phylos MediaWorks production.